In this 44th week of Bible in a Year, we finally reach the destruction of Jerusalem under Nebuchadnezzar. And over in the New Testament, Paul reaches Rome, where eventually he will suffer a martyr's death. But how did we get here? Well, let's take a couple of minutes to recap our biblical history thus far. Step back with me to Genesis chapter 12. The year is 2000 BC, more or less. Abraham responds to God's call and departs for Canaan. His grandson Jacob heads to Haran in search of a wife. Joseph makes an unexpected trip to Egypt, but paves the way for his family to escape the widespread famine. The Hebrews grow in numbers. The Egyptians become nervous and turn them into slaves. So God sends Moses. We have a burning bush, 10 plagues, a parted Red Sea, and the people assemble at Mount Sinai to receive the law. And 500 years have elapsed since Abraham. Well, Moses dies and Joshua leads the nation into the promised land. They have no king as yet, so one judge after another rises up to lead them, from Deborah to Gideon to Samson and finally Samuel. Saul is crowned king, but he proves inadequate. David is revealed as a man after God's own heart, although he is prone to errors of judgment just as any one of us might make. And before you know it, 10 centuries have slipped by since Abraham. Solomon builds a temple in Jerusalem, but civil war breaks out for Rehoboam, his successor. David's descendants rule over the southern kingdom of Judah, but a succession of dynasties reign over the northern kingdom of Israel. Let's change the scale on our timeline to look at this next period in more detail. God sends one prophet after another to call his people back to true worship, but in 722 BC, the northern kingdom is taken off into exile by the Assyrians. Barely 100 years later, a similar fate will befall the southern kingdom. In 605 AD, Nebuchadnezzar will deport members of the nobility, including Daniel. 8 years later, he will deport 10,000 Jews, including priests, artisans, and military officers. Among them will be the prophet Ezekiel. And finally, in 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar will sack Jerusalem, destroy the temple, and take the survivors into exile in Babylon. Well, in our Sunday sermon series, we've been looking recently at the return from exile. So skip ahead, if you will, to 537 BC. And you have Cyrus announcing a new policy. The Jews may return and rebuild God's temple in Jerusalem. This is completed in 515 BC and described in the book of Ezra. The story of Esther takes place soon after, and then in 458 BC, some 80 years after Cyrus's announcement, Ezra himself arrives in Jerusalem, followed soon afterwards by Nehemiah. And this brings us to the end of the Old Testament narrative. The Persian Empire will in turn be superseded by the Greek Empire, with Alexander the Great. And by the time we reach the New Testament, it will be the Romans under Augustine who believe that they are in charge. We, of course, know better. Well, I hope you enjoyed our whistle-stop tour of the Old Testament. This week's readings include Jeremiah, chapters 32 to 40, 2 Psalms, and the final chapters of 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. we also get to read Habakkuk, a prophet who asks some searching questions about how God can bear to tolerate evil in this world. And our New Testament readings take us from Acts chapter 24 to Paul's arrival in Rome. Our Old Testament overview was such fun. Let's do something similar, but a bit quicker for the New Testament. Roll back in time, if you will, to Acts chapter 1. Some nervous disciples are gathered in the upper room. The year is 30 AD, give or take. The wind blows, fire falls, and the day of Pentecost is upon us. We read of great sermons, amazing miracles, many conversions, and growing opposition. The work is initially centered in Jerusalem, but it spreads to Samaria and Judea. And approximately 10 years later, the door is open to the Gentiles through the conversion of Cornelius. Paul and Barnabas set off on their first missionary journey, announcing the good news throughout modern-day Turkey. But there's growing tensions within Jewish circles, and in 50 AD, the Council of Jerusalem is convened to ratify that Gentiles do not need to follow the law of Moses. Paul sets off again and establishes churches in Greece. He returns to Jerusalem, carrying a trunk full of coins for the relief of the poor in Judea. And there he is set upon by his enemies. He's arrested by the Romans. And Acts chapters 24 to 26 tell of his trials before Governor Felix, and later before Agrippa II, the son of the Herod who had tried and failed to have Peter executed back in Acts chapter 12. Well, Paul realizes he will never receive a fair trial in Judea, so he appeals to have his case heard before Caesar. And the book ends with a traumatic sea journey and his eventual arrival in Rome. So what happened to Paul afterwards? Well, the details are a bit sketchy. The book of Titus suggests that he made a longer visit to Crete and established churches there. And 2 Timothy is widely believed to be Paul's final letter as he finds himself once more a prisoner in Rome. According to Eusebius, Paul was beheaded on the orders of the Emperor Nero. And at around about the same time, the Apostle Peter was also put to death, crucified upside down. Well, enjoy your Bible readings and do try to join us on Sunday evening as we discuss all that we have read.